We are officially one day away from the release of Gundam Breaker 4, and today I'm checking out the previous entry in the franchise, New Gundam Breaker, which is infamous for being really terrible. But is the game really as bad as everyone makes it out to be? That's what we're going to talk about today, and I'm very excited to dive into it. But before we get into my thoughts, I want to hear from you guys, so head on down to the comment section below. If you played New Gundam Breaker, let me know what you think of it. Do you think it is quite as bad as people say it is, or do you think it's a little bit overhated? And while you're there, please do leave a like on this video and subscribe if you're a fan of mecha anime content and want to see plenty more videos like this in the future. So straight away, I can probably answer the question of is New Gundam Breaker quite as bad as people make it out to be by saying that yes, this game is not very good. It is boring, and that is probably the biggest criticism I can give it, because when I go into a Gundam Breaker game, when I go into a Gundam game in general, I don't go in expecting extremely high quality, best of the best AAA video game quality. I go in hoping to have fun with it. It is the case with SD Gundam Battle Alliance. It has been the case with the open network test for Gundam Breaker 4. So I was kind of hoping that, okay, maybe New Gundam Breaker is just that, but not quite as good as some of the other entries. And unfortunately, as soon as I started playing it, I just found it boring. Like, it wasn't a fun experience to play whatsoever. And there are many reasons why that is the case, and that's a lot of what we're going to talk about in this video, about why the game is quite frankly just boring. Starting off with the missions, they all feel exactly the same. Essentially, you go into them and they're kind of called these like G-cube fights, where it's a 3v3, but like each team is kind of completing objectives, and I guess the team that like completes the most objectives and then ultimately like defeats the other team, I guess, they are the ones that are victorious in the mission. The problem is that every single mission is practically the exact same. The objectives kick off the same way. First objectives usually destroy 10 containers. Then it's destroy 20 neutral units, which are essentially computer AI players that you're up against. And then there's like destroying specific units, destroying like 4 of a certain type of mobile suit. And then sometimes you'll get like a big war machine come in, a big mobile armor, something along those lines. And that is essentially the structure of every single mission. And I know that is also the case for quite a lot of video games, quite frankly, but especially a lot of the Gundam games. I know playing Gundam Breaker 4, you are essentially just fighting off other Gunpla, other mobile suits, and that is what the game is. That's kind of what every mission is going to be. SD Gundam Battle Alliance, similar thing. You play through a level, potentially have like a couple of boss fights, and then you really have one major boss fight. But essentially the games are just fighting off enemies. And that's what New Gundam Breaker is. Except it's not fun to play it though. Like, that is the problem. If it was repetitive, but it was fun repetitive, I feel like it would be okay, because you would enjoy the repetition, you would just enjoy playing it. And I went from playing New Gundam Breaker to then, like, immediately after, going and playing SD Gundam Battle Alliance, and the difference in how much fun each is to play is almost night and day. One feels incredibly sluggish and slow, which we'll dive more into in a little bit. SD Gundam Battle Alliance, it moves way quicker, it flows way better. Just overall, it is such a much better experience, a much more enjoyable experience compared to New Gundam Breaker. And on that topic of the game being slow, the movement in this game is really just slow and sluggish. Getting from one place to another feels like a complete slog, and it's really not helped by the size of the maps, the size of the areas. Now, they're not huge when you look at them as like a complete thing, but when your mobile suit moves so slowly, and even when you're boosting, it generally moves pretty slowly, it just makes getting from one place to another a slog. Just something that completely brings you down, and you're almost bored just getting from one place to another. One of the things that really doesn't help with that is the enemy spawn points. They're not always in the exact same place, but generally when a group of enemies spawn, it spawns in a particular area. So if you are at one side of the map, which to be frank is quite often the case, you will have to go from one like side of this little area map that you've got to another when another group of enemies spawns in, and because of that, you're just having to trail all the way over there, and by the time you get there, the other enemy team has already completed that objective. So it slows you down in that regard and potentially makes you lose out of purely poor game design and pure like enemy placement. And whilst we're talking about the enemies, let's talk about the enemy AI. It is really poor. There are times where the enemies just simply won't attack you. There are like objectives within this where you have to recover parts, and that's one of the other problems. You can only kind of pick up a maximum of 5 parts at a time, and you've got to go drop them in this box, which half the time is over on the other side of the map. So again, really slows you down. There's times where I'd be chased by enemies, and I'll make it over to that box, and I'll start putting them in. All the enemies will get to me, but they just won't attack me. They'll kind of just walk off, and it's like, what the hell is going on? Why is the AI so poor? Like, don't get me wrong, it's nice being able to put things in a box without being swarmed by enemies and attacked by them all. But at the same time, you kind of expect that. On the other hand, though, you'll have times where all the enemies will attack you at once, and you simply cannot get a hit in, and then your health is completely drained, and you're dead. Now, you respawn, that's fine, but ultimately that takes like 5 seconds, and half the time you have to travel ages to then get to those enemies again. It's just really poor AI design where sometimes none of them will attack you, and then other times they'll all attack you. There's no balance to it all. It's either one extreme or the other, and again, it just makes the game really not a fun experience. The last thing I want to talk about though is the story mode, and like I said earlier, I don't go in expecting something incredible. I simply want the game to be fun. If the story is utter garbage, if the dialogue is horrific, which in this game it is not the greatest thing ever, but at the end of the day, that's not really what I go in for. I just go in to have a fun time. When I don't have a fun time though, I kind of want something from the story. The story doesn't really provide that, but also the story mode is incredibly short. Now, there are multiple different character routes that you can take, but they all pretty much have the same exact missions. If you are going to go the direction of different character routes, you want every single one of them to feel different, or at the very least have different missions, go on different character arcs with these people. But because for the most part they're all together, you do get the occasional mission where it's, different from one character as opposed to the other, and it's, essentially you, the lead protagonist, and then this other character kind of sharing the screen together, and then that mission is slightly different, has different dialogue. But when it comes to most of the stuff, when it comes to most of the missions, they're the exact same. You'll play through one character's version of it, then the next, then the other characters, and so on and so forth, and they're all the exact same storyline. They switch out the dialogue slightly and tweak it, but at the end of the day, it's the same thing, and you can tell it's the same thing. They've just simply written slightly altered dialogue. It is lazy, and it also makes the game ultimately feel very short, but at the same time very repetitive, because you are literally repeating the exact same missions down to a T. So yeah, in case you didn't get the idea already, New Gundam Breaker is well and truly as bad as people make it out to be. But at the same time, it is not the worst thing I've ever played. It is simply just not a fun and enjoyable game. It is not a completely broken mess. There are definitely broken elements to it, but it is certainly a playable game at the same time. So it's not a straight up worst of the worst, 0 out of 5 stars, nothing like that. It doesn't give you that experience of having something fun and entertaining. A lot of the elements, a lot of the gameplay mechanics are simply not very good, or they are lackluster compared to other entries in the franchise or just other Gundam games. And like I've said multiple times in this video, the number one criticism I can give this game is that it is simply boring. And when I go into a Gundam game, that's really not what I want, and that is the worst possible outcome for it. Thankfully though, in a day's time, we can completely forget about the existence of this particular game and move on to something bigger and better. So with all that in mind, I'm going to give New Gundam Breaker a D. But those were my thoughts on New Gundam Breaker. Before I get out of here, please do leave a like on this video and subscribe if you are a fan of mecha anime content and want to see plenty more videos like this in the future. And like I did say earlier, head on down to the comment section below. Let me know your thoughts on New Gundam Breaker if you played it. Do you think it is quite as bad as it's made out to be? Stay tuned for plenty more Gundam Breaker content coming in the near future with the release of Gundam Breaker 4 tomorrow. Thank you once again for tuning into Mecha Chat today, and I'll see you guys next time.